On the night of September 27, 2024, the southeastern United States would change forever as Hurricane Helene made landfall in Florida's Big Bend region and subsequently caused widespread devastation, particularly in the mountains of western North Carolina. The hurricane ended up killing over 200 people, caused tens of billions of dollars in damages, and left some cities without power and running water for weeks. But what's intriguing about this hurricane is where the worst devastation happened. Despite it making landfall in northern Florida, the worst impacts were felt in and around Asheville, North Carolina, around 400 miles of inland. Why was this the case, and what made Helene so strong to begin with? Now, before we get into that, I'd appreciate you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for future content. Okay, so before we get into why North Carolina specifically felt the worst impacts, we need to get into why Helene was so strong to begin with. Simply put, it was all of the factors that allow for hurricanes to develop to begin with aligning perfectly. For starters, the Gulf of Mexico is typically at its warmest during late September, and for the past couple of years, it's been anomalously warm even for these standards. This has been part of a global trend ever since early 2023, where pretty much every ocean basin has exhibited near record warmth compared to average. Though climate change is believed to play a part, scientists still aren't entirely sure why the oceans just started to get exceptionally hot over this period specifically. Regardless, this was viewed as a concern because warm water is essentially to a hurricane like a tank of liquid propane is to a spark. But warm water isn't the only thing that is needed for hurricanes to grow and develop. Another limiting factor for their strength is so-called wind shear, which is essentially winds blowing in different directions at different layers of the atmosphere, and has the potential to tear apart even a strong hurricane. However, wind shear was practically non-existent in Helene's path, so the storm was able to hold itself together. The last thing that can stall a hurricane's development is dry air. Simply put, if a would-be hurricane moves into a pocket of dry air, it will lack the moisture needed to sustain itself and quickly fall apart. As you probably guessed, this too was virtually absent in the case of Helene. So, with record warm water, no wind shear to tear it apart, and all the moisture it could ask for, the stage was set for Helene to quickly become a monster hurricane, and that it did. In less than 24 hours, Helene went from a 90-mile-per-hour Category 1 hurricane to a 140-mile-per-hour Category 4 hurricane, and shortly thereafter, it made landfall in Florida's Big Bend. In doing so, it set the record for the strongest hurricane to ever make landfall in that region, with the previous record being set in 2023 by Hurricane Idalia, which was a low-end Category 3 when it made landfall. Okay, so if Helene made landfall in Florida, why wasn't it the focal point for the storm's damage? Sure, Helene did wreak havoc on the state, causing 26 fatalities and over $20 billion in damages. But Helene is most infamous for the damage it did further north in the southern Appalachians, as these are the places that were left without power and running water for weeks on end. The reason North Carolina in particular was hit so badly largely comes down to three major factors. First of all, the region was already saturated from rainfall that had come a few days prior, so there was already very little room for water to soak into the soil instead of running off. Secondly, Helene was an absolutely gigantic storm, with tropical storm force winds extending hundreds of miles from the eye, and bands of rain extending even further out than that. This already made more distant regions like North Carolina more susceptible to the storm's impacts than usual, but it gets even worse than that because the storm was so large, it was able to use favorable geography to deal an even larger blow to the region. You see, the storm was so large that it extended past the Florida peninsula and out into the open Atlantic Ocean. From here, the storm's outer rain bands were able to pick up extra moisture before being carried into the Carolinas by the storm's counterclockwise rotation. These rain bands then crashed against the southern Appalachian Mountains, where a phenomenon known as orographic lift was able to take place. Through this process, the moisture that was in these rain bands got completely squeezed out as it rose up the mountains, leading to copious amounts of rainfall that exceeded 2 feet in some places. This fell on top of the already saturated soil, causing even more water to run off into rivers and streams and causing numerous landslides. But there is a final factor that worked against the region's largest city, Asheville. The city is situated in a bowl-shaped valley, which means water effectively funnels into the city from multiple different directions. This drastically increased the sheer volume of water that ended up in Asheville's main rivers, most notably the French Broad and Swananoa rivers, which come together in the city. Both rivers smashed their all-time flood records, which were set during an already prolific flood that happened in 1916, and they virtually inundated significant swaths of the city. With the extreme flooding from intense rainfall, the landslides that were occurring around the city, and the fact that Helene was still a hurricane with relatively strong winds, Asheville and surrounding towns were not only decimated, they were essentially cut off from the outside world, making it hard for relief to get in. As of late November, one of the major highways into the city, that being Interstate 40 from the west, is still closed and is expected to remain closed into 2025. All told, this was a devastating event that came together because of remarkably unlucky geography and circumstances, and it will take a long time for the region to truly recover. On a broader scale, understanding the vulnerabilities that a specific region may have in the face of certain natural disasters can go a long way in properly planning for them and averting the worst impacts that they may bring. And that's all I have to say about Hurricane Helene. As always, I'd appreciate you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for future content. Thanks and have a great day.